It was a funny old year, 2023, but for MotoGP, it's another case of going back to Bagnaia. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 490. Man, we're in the home stretch and the run to 500 here as we wrap up season review season here on Motorsport 101. And on this week's episode, we're going to be talking all about the 2023 MotoGP season in review form. I'm your friend and neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever. Before I really get started, you guys have been following and messaging along in droves since last week's public news became very official, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you. It's been a disgustingly overwhelming amount of messages saying, Dre, I can't believe you're gone. Like, Dre, I'm going to listen to M101 now. Hi, glad you could join us. Welcome
we enjoy
aboard.
Your company.
F1 season review was one of the fastest listened to shows to get to like over 500 plays across the platforms since this year started. So thank you all for hopping along on the wagon. Glad you could join us. Hope you stick around. And hope you enjoy not just me talking about F1 all the time for a change as well. So that's wonderful. So thank you for joining us. Hope you stick around. And it'll be just me and my co-host, Mr. Cam Buckley, this week. Sadly, RJ's a little bit under the weather with Christmas flu. I know it's doing the rounds like a motherfucker over there at the moment. So, get well soon, buddy. Hope to get you on next week for the awards show. I'll talk more about that at the end. But Mr. Cam Buckley, how are we doing, sir?
I'd be doing better if this wasn't the MotoGP review season.
Good start.
The season of season reviews, and this season review is pain. But what else is new?
What else is new? There's no getting around it. If you've been listening to MotoGP shows we've done over the course of this year, we've not exactly been rolling out the red carpet for the series this year. It's been a difficult year. We've still got issues we need to address and talk about over the course of the season, but we'll try and spin up some of the positive. There'll certainly be one for a certain manufacturer in here, which we'll get to later on in the meat and potatoes of the show as well, which we'll definitely address down the back end. But this is our MotoGP season review episode. Hope you guys enjoyed the show as ever. And we're going to go factory by factory through the grid through 2023. So Honda will be up first in reverse championship order. We got Honda, then Yamaha, Aprilia in the midfield, then KTM and Ducati, who beat the field over their knees all year long. And we'll get into some of that over the course of the next hour and change or so. But places you can find us real quick while we're here. You can follow me on Twitter. I've changed the username back. I won't be doing that again anytime soon. Dre Harrison 101 if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Cam has not changed. cbuckley917. He's loyal to his Porsche branding. That's not going to change anytime soon, if ever. You can follow Motorsport 101 on Twitter at Motorsport_101. You can follow us on Instagram at Motorsport101pod. And by the time this goes out, you'll also be able to follow us on TikTok. We'll be on there as well now, providing highlights and extra video bits from yours truly. I won't tell you the username just yet. I'll leave it in the description by the time this goes out, because by the time it goes out, obviously I don't know what usernames are available and what isn't yet, so we'll try and get something quirky.
You leave our username up for grabs, you little rascals.
Yeah, the underscore in M101 is there for a reason on Twitter. The original one I wanted was taken. In the same way that Harrison 101 has been taken on Twitter since 2009. 2009! it's the worst. I hate social media. You can also follow us on our website, motorsport101.com. Part 1 of the full written version of my thoughts on the MotoGP season is already up there, as well as the 11,000 word strong F1 season review in 3 parts. If you haven't checked that out already, if you're into your 4 wheels, I wrote a lot of shit about Formula 1 this year, and you can check that out if you haven't already. Maybe part 2 of the MotoGP review will be out by the time this goes out. Can't guarantee it. It's a busy time in the life of Dre as we run up towards Christmas, but I will try my very best to get part 2 out before the weekend. So look forward to that as well. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101 to follow us on there. A bunch of extra perks and fun stuff on there as well if you're that way inclined. I'm just looking at my email inbox now because I did want to give somebody a shout out because they have backed us on there. Give me just a second here. Massive thanks to Ben Fifield and Yang Zhou, who together have put in a pledge to join us on Patreon. Thank you very much for backing us and supporting us. Very, very much appreciated. Really, really appreciate that. So thank you. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into our 2023 MotoGP season review. Right.
All right, crew. You know the drill. You know how we do these things. We are going to go in reverse constructor order, and man, we start with Honda.
We do start with Honda. We know the drill by now. We do this in reverse championship order, and Honda did lose that wooden spoon battle with Yamaha by 11 points in the end. So Honda gets to go first. Now, we promised ourselves we wouldn't talk about this in too much detail because, well,
we've been talking about it for long enough.
Yeah, if you've been listening to this show all year, you know for a fact that we've ragged on this manufacturer all year long. I don't think you need me to go into too much detail as to why they've struggled. Marc Marquez, the talismanic rider, was 14th in the championship this year with 96 points. Just 1 Grand Prix podium, 3 in the sprints. He was pretty good over half distance, but not over the full race distance for Honda and tyre-related reasons. Johan Mir was 22nd. Alex RIns was 19th. Alex RIns outscored Johan Mir 2-1, despite the fact RIns only did 7 races this year, which kind of says it all, really.
And a couple of those were barely, given the state of his leg.
Yeah.
Taka Nakagami, 18th in points on 56th. I mean, kind of just, he was the safe pair of hands, if anyone is safe on that bike. Best finish of 8th, but a really anonymous year for that reason. Oh, God. When you think you hit rock bottom, there's always a rockier bottom below that. And Honda's 2022 was bad. This was an entirely different level of just really, really poor from everyone involved. Everything they did to the bike was... I mean, they outsourced manufacturing of the bike. Swing arm and frame.
They gave up their swing arm to Kalex. Kalex built them an entirely new frame, which they debuted at Le Mans. The signs were initially promising, but then it didn't really make a massive difference.
Didn't move the needle much. It was just another year of Honda spinning their wheels while everyone passes them by. I mean, we're going to get to the other side of Japan later, but even in the second half of this year, Yamaha looked like they were in way better shape, and their bike is slow. Yeah. And they're dealing with a lot of the same conundrum. Yeah, they're dealing with a lot of the same kind of conundrum within their team about the technical direction of their bike and their own marquee rider with feels like 1.5 feet out the door. We've said enough about Marc Marquez. I think that much is pretty obvious, and I think he is loving life now, given he is on given the compilations of shit-eating grins from the postseason test in Valencia. Um, but I'm going to look actually to the other side of the garage. Johan Mir's stock was dismantled to the base this year. I cannot think of Dre, it's the worst year by a world champion I can remember.
This was worse than Jorge Lorenzo's 2019. Like, this was... Like, I didn't think the bar could get any lower. Like, Mir scored almost half his points from that one top 5 finish he had in India, which was one of the few rounds that suited Honda over the course of the season. Marquez was running podium level pace until he had an early near crash like he's done in the past. But Mir only took part in 15 races this season through injury and other crashes, because he had a lot of those. He had like 20, 26, 27 crashes over the course of the season.
Between these two, they broke the half century on crashes with races to spare.
Yeah, they did it in Sepang with 2 rounds left. They were over half a century for the year. I was surprised Marc Marquez didn't get off a bike at some point and then raise his bat to the pavilion like he was playing cricket. And yeah, Johan Mir only finished. Johan Mir only finished 6 Grand Prix all season. That's 6 out of 20.
That's for a guy who was not renowned as a crasher, and for a guy who won his championship through having the high floor, having the consistency while everyone else was melting down. That is unconscionable.
Yeah. A guy that won a world title on consistency and mitigating errors. He has had his worst season in Grand Prix comfortably. And he's now going to be their team leader. He's now going to be spearheading the direction of this team, you would feel. He's had the extra year of experience. He knows this bike better than anybody else in that camp now. Look, the ramifications of the all-in Marquez approach, Mir is the biggest victim of that, without question. And it goes across to the LCR teams. Like Alex Rins had that leg breaker that was so horrifying that not even Dorna replayed it, which kind of says it all, given that Dorna will replay people literally dying. They never showed a replay of Alex Rins' incident. We still, to this day, do not know how horrifying that incident actually was. And this is a guy that won a race this year.
Yeah, he was, in a track that kind of mitigates a lot of what the Honda does badly. Rins, with Marquez being absent after his Portimao crash, he was there to take the spoils when Bagnaia threw it up the road. Yeah. And then the bike broke him for it. One of the worst leg breaks in recent memory. He's still not right. We still don't know what state he's going to be in going into next year. That has obviously hurt his preparation, having switched to the other side of Japan, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly explain, he had to have a second operation on that leg because they figured out something was wrong with it when once he got back on the bike.
He had a shard of bone that was impinging on a nerve.
Yeah.
Is that good?
He was in immense pain.
Is that in any way, shape, or form good?
No. That is a leg that is not healed properly.
No. Awful. I mean, getting to the bigger ramifications of this year for Honda, I mean, obviously they lost their Shohei Ohtani. They lost their Tom Brady. They lost their talisman. Marc is gone. Mir is team leader. And this less than a year after he first tested this Honda and got off of it with a 1,000-yard stare. This Alex Rins bailing to go to the other struggle bus manufacturer in MotoGP because he felt undervalued and this bike quite literally broke him.
Yeah.
And Taka Nakagami, who, I like Taka, but putting him back in the microwave for another year, he was just sort of there all year.
You're only supposed to reheat your food once, not twice. We all know that there's a good chance that Nakagami wasn't even meant to come back for this year because of Ayagura and the fact that he didn't want to be in LCR's MotoGP team in 2022 because he didn't feel like he was ready. Came back for 23 this year, mangled his wrist in preseason testing, and it completely derailed Agura's season.
The Agura surprise was effectively a season-ending injury. He was never he's still not 100% from that.
Yeah,
and
mangled. It was a really horrible, like Toseland level wrist break. Like, it's rough. And by the way, just as a quick side note, he's had surgery on his wrist again this week, and so Toseland's one of the good dudes in bike racing. So get well soon, James. Hopefully, you can finally get some mobility in that wrist again, which goes to show you that the man had an incredible career and had to retire in his early 30s because he was going to lose the ability to move his wrist. You can't afford to fuck that up if you're a bike racer, because if you fuck it up too bad, you can't move it.
It's everything.
And that's a quality of life adjustment. Let alone you're not able to ride bikes again. That's you have a disability now problem. And
I mean, God, how we're ending this season, right, with Honda. They went into 2023 with probably the best rider lineup in the field.
Probably.
The two high points of that are now gone. The other high point of that has no stock anymore. And you now have the people you begged and pleaded and cut huge checks for to pry them away from other manufacturers because multiple riders turned you away, said, we don't want your problems.
Look, I will say this. I don't think they've done too badly to get Johan Zarco.
Given what was on the table, yeah. I agree.
Like that, they've done well. Zarco just had his best season in MotoGP. He was 5th overall this year. Zarco is one of the most experienced and also versatile riders in the field. He's ridden something like this bike in years prior. So he actually has a little bit of Honda experience. If you wanted a decent veteran who is prepared to be patient because he wants the long-term security of his future, because that's part of the reason why he went to Honda. He openly said Pramac would only give me a 1-year deal. He wanted the 2-year guarantee, and Honda was prepared to give it to him, and that's understandable. When you're in your mid-30s, you want to make money, and Honda's at least prepared to open its wallet for someone, and they're doing that for Zarco. I think that's a good move. I think he's a valuable guy to have in that camp somewhere as a mouthpiece, as a development head. And look,
I think he's the
Luca
best
Marini,
person they could have gotten as far as moving the bike forward, because that's the problem.
Yeah, and Marini is a good rider. He has improved. He's a genuinely very quick rider now. We'll get to him later on over his season, but he's very fast over a lap, very fast in the sprint format. That's where he excelled most, and he's now a top 10 rider in the field. So
have you heard he's Valentino Rossi's half brother?
It never gets mentioned.
A member of the Rossi family back at factory Honda. This is rough. This is weird.
Team leaned into that. It's kind of a weird vibe, but that's very much a real thing now.
I mean, at the end of the day, no matter who they bring in for their riders, no matter who they bring in for team management, because there's been much made of the potential picking up of Davide Brivio. That doesn't fix what's going on here.
No. Davide is a people person. He's not a bike person.
Absolutely. He will manage that team as well as anyone on this grid. But the team and the people on the ground are not the problem. The problem's the bike. And maybe we've seen some shoots of recovery in postseason, but we've also been here before. The 2024, the proper 2024 Honda did get reasonably warm welcome from Mir, from Marini, pretty much everyone who rode it, other than Zarco, who then threw one up the road.
Still, it's a net positive, I would say. I think Honda came away from that test quite happy. There's more.
The problem is that the same
coming.
thing happened in 22.
That's the problem. Is this
rubbered
fool's gold?
Track helps them.
Yeah. Like, that's the question. Is this fool's gold? Is like, have they genuinely found something? I don't know. Like I saw David Emmett share this the other day that they've got more parts coming from Japan this week as well. Like it looks
They don't have a choice.
Yeah, it
This
looks
is
like
the mode of working that they have to operate in now.
Yeah, it looks like they've hit the panic button now that Marquez is gone. It's like, okay, we've lost Marquez. We need to go all in on this. But this should have happened a year and a half ago, quite frankly.
Should have happened before that. I mean, when your entire strategy is, well, Mark will deal with it for over half a decade, eventually that's going to come to bite you. And it's not, I don't think it's going to stop biting them for a while.
Yeah, this is not going to be fixed overnight. This is not an overnight problem fix. This is we have a significant problem with this bike, and it's going to take years to make the gains on the field that they need to make this comfortable. There's a spark of hope. Like I said, that Valencia test was probably a net positive for them overall. They needed something to hang on to. But, it's a long road back. They will inevitably, they have taken a dip in quality of rider. There is no question there. Marc Marquez is gone. No one can ride a Honda like Marc Marquez ever has. And this is coming from a guy that likes Marini and likes Zarco as riders. I think they are better than I think a lot of people give them credit for. And I think they're two ideal candidates to try and put this team back together. I mean, look, Marini walked away from one of the best teams in MotoGP to go to Honda. He's been largely praised as a thinking man's rider. I like dudes like him, and I think they've done well to have them in their camp. But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I want to see what this team can do at Sepang when that test rolls around in February. I'm going to be very curious to see what the media dialogue and the conversations will be when we get to Sepang, because they need to show something, because Honda's not going to tolerate being at the bottom of the standings 3 years in a row. Like
we have not lived in that world. That world has not existed in Grand Prix motorcycle racing since before Honda switched to the 2-strokes for 83.
Yeah, this is unprecedented territory for Honda, and that's why I think now they're acting out, because they've looked. Before I move on, as I wrote about this in part 1 of my season review, there is such a thing as superstar fatigue. I've said this before. We're baseball fans here. Shohei Ohtani going to the Dodgers was a massive story, and it deservedly was a massive story. Him going there for $700 million and then deferring 680 of that money is an outrageous sports story, whether you're a baseball fan or not. That is the sort of athlete that Marc Marquez is. When it leads to knowledgeable pundits like Ben Verlander saying dumb shit like he's the most important Dodgers signing ever, ignoring Jackie Robinson was a thing. It puts into perspective
when you have people like Mad Dog Russo saying this morning that Shaq isn't a top 5 all-time center, which, by the way, may be the worst basketball take ever.
That is
insanity.
That is a horrible take. No, but the point I'm getting at is that that is the level of superstar that Honda has lost here. This is their Shohei Ohtani moment, and Honda are now the Angels figuring out what they're going to do with their broken roster, and another superstar like Mike Trout, who might not stick around knowing that his other key piece to a potential title run is gone. And that'll be one to keep an eye on, as it is as well. But if you're a baseball fan, but in general, the Honda are now the Angels. They now have to figure out how to rebuild, and that's not going to be an overnight process. Good luck to them, and good luck to Honda, because I think they're going to need it. Let's go across. Let's go across the aisle, Japan-wise, to Yamaha.
A bastion of positivity.
A beacon.
Monster Energy Yamaha MotoGP. Oh God.
Fabio Quartararo was 10th in the standings, 3 podiums, 1 sprint podium in Assen, 3 third places on the year. Frankie Morbidelli was 13th on 102 points. He peaked at the 4th in the sprint in the race in Argentina. That was a fun weekend. We talk about Honda and the fact that Honda have lost their Shohei with Marc Marquez going to Ducati. Are we a year away from Yamaha potentially having the exact same problem with Fabio Quartararo? Because it feels like the timer is running down on this time bomb.
Because I think the time's already run out.
You reckon?
I think Fabio's already gone. Because the way he talked about the bike post preseason or postseason test, that they need more. I don't think Yamaha is going to be able to produce more. Because I don't versus Honda, where I think they are completely out to lunch with what to do with the bike. I think Yamaha has the core of something here.
Yes.
The problem is that they've got two different sides of the camp trying to pull the bike in different directions. You've got Cal Crutchlow, who has been screaming at Yamaha to take their fundamentals that they're already good at and improve them and get the rest of the bike just well enough that it can all work together. The smoothness, the cornering, the ability to carry that apex speed that only an inline four can. And Fabio Quartararo on the other side of the aisle saying, well, just give me more power and I'll deal with the repercussions. Well, that's what happened this year, and it was an unmitigated disaster. It made this Yamaha practically unrideable around certain tracks because the bike just can't get the power to the ground.
I was going to say, like, maybe we shouldn't be pinning all your development hopes on a 23-year-old rider who's only had 4 full flight seasons. That's a little bold. And I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. I mean, Cal Crutchlow is one of the most dependable people in MotoGP's
He's ridden
paddock.
everything in the sport, man.
He's ridden everything in the sport. He was a great rider in his day, a multiple-time race winner. It was one of the few people that was a genuine top 6 rider in the sport on a Honda and a Yamaha. That doesn't happen very often in this sport. Like, I actually think Britain didn't. I think Britain was a bit of. I think we actually kind of undervalued Cal Crutchlow as a rider when he was around, because he was really genuinely good for a long time, and he was just outclassed by the aliens of this era. But I digress. Fabio is in an interesting place, and I actually slightly disagree with Cam on this one, in that I don't think it's set in stone. I think Fabio has become a bit more accepting of his situation. He said after Valencia that the back end of the year his results weren't as bad as he thought they were going to be. It says to me this is a guy who, let's not forget, earlier this year was making bold statements around Misano saying, give me something to ride here or else I'm gone. And he's kind of walked it back a little bit since then. I don't think it's set in stone he's going to be leaving Yamaha at the end of next year. I think there's a reasonable chance he stays. And
I think they have to show him something that
maybe
I'm not sure they're capable of. Maybe they have, but if they have it, then why is it on the bike yet?
I don't know.
It's not for a lack of resources. Yamaha has more money than God. So does Honda.
Maybe the fact it's a more stable platform and the fact that they have been able to punch a little bit higher than Honda on a good day has been enough to temper some of Fabio's results. Because it's something I mentioned in my season review piece as well. Quartararo and Marquez are close. They have both found a lot of, I guess, misery loves company vibes in their respective struggles, and they've joked about it on social media that, you know, we're both at the back, and Quartararo has spoken glowingly of Marquez and his patience of just trying to figure out how to ride that Honda. He knows how good Marc Marquez is as a bike rider, and he knows what he's been going through right now. Quartararo has the luxury of being 7 years younger than Marc. He's still only 24 years of age. He's a baby in MotoGP terms. I wonder if Fabio will look at the Marquez situation and use that to influence his inevitable decision, because he is a free agent at the end of next year, and it's a massive free agency in MotoGP next season. Both factory Ducatis, Jorge Martin, Marc Marquez will be a free agent again. Joan Mir will be a free agent again at the end of next year. These are big names. Like again, Maverick is a free agent. Alicia Spargaro is a free agent. This field will likely get blown up by the middle of next year, knowing how we know how this sport goes. I think some of the big names like Bagnaia will stay, for example, but there is a chance we're getting a full blown UK government style reshuffle in the cabinet here. So, and Quartararo is big money. He's young. We all know he's a world champion. We know he should have contended for at least a couple more world titles. He is incredibly valuable as a bike rider to have in that camp. And a factory will pay big money to bring him in, no question. I make no bones about that. I'd argue he might be the best rider on the planet to build a team around right now, given he's young, fast, and dependable. Like, there's no better formula because he's 3 years younger than Bagnaia as well. People forget that he's the ideal candidate for a rebuild, and Yamaha knows that. So I don't know if Fabio is thinking about an exit or thinking about whether he's going to stick it out and sacrifice 2 more years of his career to find out whether the Yamaha can get back up the field or not, because they've got fundamental problems. They are not crash happy, but they are slow, and that is an issue. Even at the test, they still looked massively off the pace. Like, at least Honda showed a little something where they were like, okay, at least the bike's fast. But we knew that about Honda. Yamaha are just slow, and that's an issue in of itself.
Yeah, and it's kind of a theme with the Japanese bikes as well, where rather than it being this holistic approach to the whole bike of engine and electronics and aero and chassis and swing arm, it just feels a little bit like the Japanese manufacturers, and they said it themselves, they're 3 years down on the aero wars compared to those like Ducati, those like Aprilia, who pretty much are all like aero might be Aprilia's biggest ace in the hole right now. With these two manufacturers, while they continue to stick bits onto their existing bikes, rather than take the entire approach top to bottom to go into the aero and ride height device era, I really don't see them getting back up the grid.
It's not going to be. I mean, look, we
know. I think changes that fundamental, that might influence Fabio to go elsewhere to an Aprilia, who are going to have a very interesting rider conundrum, to a KTM or, God forbid, a Ducati.
Yeah, it's worth talking about the rest of Yamaha before we move on real quick. I mean, Frankie Morbidelli was not kept on. He's going to Pramac next year, and shout out to his agent, because that 15% is clearly going places.
Yes, the dude fell straight to the moon, right into the best team and bike in the field. But I mean, in fairness to Frankie, he actually had a pretty good year overall. For considering where he's been, this is the first time where I think we've seen flashes of the old Frankie before the catastrophic knee injury. He ran Fabio a lot closer than he has in the last 2 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that the bar is very high.
I mean, it seemed to it that he excelled a lot more towards low grip situations. I think that's why he was so strong in Argentina when it rained for a good chunk of that weekend, and he was fourth. That was clearly his best weekend on the Yamaha since the Petronas days when he was with the customer team.
I say first half was pretty good. Second half, not so much.
Yeah, to be fair, by that point, the decision had already been made. You know, like he was gone by Silverstone, basically. They knew they were going to move on, and Alex RIns had become available. And if you can get Alex RIns, you sign Alex RIns. And RIns is a top 5 rider in the world now. For me, Yamaha now has the best single rider lineup in MotoGP. They have a top 3 rider in Fabio, and they have a top 5 rider in RIns. No other team has that across both their seats.
And I still don't expect jack shit out of him next year, because, I mean,
wild.
Even in race pace, if they're all right, they can fight for podiums. They can fight for top fives, but this bike cannot qualify.
Yeah,
and it can't qualify, and then it can't pass anything going down the straights.
Fundamental problems across the board with Yamaha, and yeah, they've got the best ride. They've got a Rossi Lorenzo-esque rider lineup in this team relative to the field again, so they really haven't got an excuse to perform now. It's their best lineup since they had Maverick and Fabio there 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They need to figure this out. Like, it's with Honda, yes, they're a mess, but you can see where the speed is there a lot more than Yamaha. Yamaha, it's so set up and track dependent that it feels like an outlier when Fabio gets it on the podium. He did do 3 times last year, but again, it's similar to where Honda's at, only not quite as headline grabbing, given they're not crashing anywhere near as much. But I digress. Let's get into Aprilia, who are in a very interesting sort of scenario themselves. Aleix Espargaro, 6th in the points, 206, 2 wins on the year rather than 1 this time round, winning in Barcelona, and Silverstone. Had a sprint win on top of that as well. Maverick Vinales was right behind him, just 2 points back on 204. Had a pole position in Valencia, which he kind of chucked away via engine exploding in warm-up. 3 podiums of his own, finished 2nd place 3 times this year, including that Portimao race where he was really close to Bagnaia. Wasn't quite enough to pass him for the win. A couple of sprint podiums as well. The RNF satellite team, not so strong. Miggy 16th in the points. Finished 4th. Was dinged up. Miguel Oliveira. Apparently, he needed like 16 races this year because he was so dinged up all the goddamn time.
Oh, what's an RNF?
Apparently it's a crypto, bro. They're gone now. Don't worry, they can't hurt you anymore. They're dead. More on that in just a minute. But Raul Fernandez was 20th in the points as well with 51. He had a 5th place to end the year in Valencia. Nice, strong result there from Raul at the end. But a bit of a tricky year for him too. Aprilia is in an interesting spot for me, Cam. I mean, they're the target. Their target was 2nd. On the year. The target was finished 2nd in the championship, constructors wise. And they were on the way towards doing that. They did overtake Yamaha in the standards, which is good, but then they got beaten themselves by KTM, who are now 2nd in the constructors for themselves.
Do you taste 3rd. A little bit of Alpine F1 here?
Yeah, it's like you beat somebody that slipped, but you were also leapfrogged by someone who was better than you, and that's kind of the problem. Like Massimo Rivera, who you may know as former Ferrari sporting director, who now runs the Aprilia team, did a long interview with Simon Patterson, which I recommend you go out and read at the race. It was very insightful. Said that they're actually quite disappointed at how this season played out. They wanted to be challenging Ducati more frequently this year, and on a good day, they still very much could. They did win in Catalunya. Again, Aprilia is very similar for me to where they were last year. Strong in low grip conditions, not so much everywhere else.
This is the races. this was their welcome to the big leagues moment, where they had this amazing, run of form last year. You can make legitimate arguments that Aleix Espargaro could have won last year's championship were it for fewer reliability and self-inflicted errors. Well, you could say that about everyone who fought for that title. But they made a pretty radical change to their bike this year, kind of across the board. Much more aggressive arrows, if it wasn't aggressive enough. We now have ground effect on motorcycles. Porpoising free. And it just feels like they spent a lot of time this year not knowing how to set the bike up. Whereas at their peak, they might have the best bike in the field, genuinely. When that bike is on it, it is almost like a mix of the Ducati's power and traction with the Yamaha smoothness.
Yeah, those two. I need to point out the 2 wins that Aleix got this year were exceptional wins. Like Barcelona. Yeah, Aprilia curb stomped everybody. Like Jorge Martin was the next Ducati back in that Grand Prix.
You don't blow Jorge Martin away on raw speed easily.
No, and both Aprilias did. That was the point. They were in a field of their own.
They rode away from him.
Yeah, and in Silverstone, when the rain came down and the track got really greasy out there, all the Aprilias excelled. All of them. Like, Spargaro was strong. Maverick was strong for most of that race. Miguel Oliveira went on an absolute berserk
Rain god. Still the rain god.
Still the rain god, Miguel Oliveira. What a guy. And that was Raul Fernandez's first top 10 finish in MotoGP that day at Silverstone as well. So all the Aprilias made significant gains when the rain came down. That Aprilia gives its riders more confidence when tracks are slippery. It just works in those sorts of conditions.
The problem is, Dre, is that when it doesn't, it's just there. Usually kind of in the pack of fighting Ducatis, but not capable of fighting people like Bagnaia, people like Bez, people like Martin, who can get that little extra something out of the Ducati. And for much of this, I mean, for the back half of the year, there were times where KTM looked clear of them too. It was never especially bad. It's just they swung anywhere from utterly dominant to anonymous. And there wasn't a real rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes they just went on the track and they went out with their setups and they just weren't very quick.
Rivera said that they felt like they had won their weekend on a Friday, and that's not what they wanted to do for this season. They said that like it's the trap we've railed on them in the past for. Like, we're really strong in practice sessions, but they can't convert that into races.
Yeah, I think that tracks. I think the next step for them, they got to get the operating window of this bike wider. Because you know why the Ducati's good? Because the Ducati is good everywhere. In all conditions, high grip, low grip, power track, traction track. It doesn't matter. The Ducati is always good. The Aprilia seems to only really excel against it when the grip is low, when the track is greasy, when it's a confidence game. And you are not going to beat Ducati being a one-trick pony.
But at least I can say I don't think the quality of the rider is the problem anymore. Because because
that's what I started to get into with you out on your internet vacation.
It happens.
Aleix Espargaro is still him.
Yeah, still, look, if Aprilia had the third best bike all year, on average, on par, is what I would say. And the fact that there was 8 dudes on strong Ducatis, for Aleix to finish 6th is still a pretty damn good season, all told. And this time...
second non-Ducati.
Yeah, and this time, Maverick Vinales was right there to back him up this year, because he was only 2 points behind, basically without the peaks of Aleix's season, pretty much a carbon copy. This was a much better year for Maverick Vinales, and I'm glad that he's starting to figure this Aprilia shit out now. He's had to wait long enough.
In general. Is this the first time he's truly put together an at-par season for where he should be? It feels like it might be.
It might be. Certainly since his early Yamaha days, and maybe the Suzuki days were maybe really good.
I would say Suzuki. Because he certainly never went at par at Yamaha, that's for damn sure. Started off one of those years on fire, though. But the other thing that strikes me as well, looking at Aleix's season, he only had 3 podiums, and 2 of those were the wins. Pretty much everything else is top 5 or is 5th or lower.
Just strong seasons across the board from Aprilia's factory riders. Positive signs that they are both figuring this bike out, figuring this setup out, and it's a pairing that's stronger now, I think, together than it was a year and a half ago, which is certainly a good step in the right direction. Obviously not the same for RNF, but that team is now dead. That team is dead, and in comes...
Rest in piss, pay your bills, crypto bros.
Yeah, it's funny we talked about this, that the day after we recorded that MotoGP season finale podcast, it turns out that crypto data had smoothed things over with Dorna, which I think says to me they probably paid their bills and
ran
fucked
home
off.
with their tails between their legs.
Yeah, it's like they probably took the money that Justin Marks gave them for Trackhouse to buy them out, used that debt to pay off Dorna, and then pissed off, basically, because it is now officially... We can now call it the Trackhouse Racing MotoGP team. They've retained both their riders, Miguel Oliveira and Raul Fernandez. And I mean, did you see the presentation last week with them and Justin Marks and some of the Dorna guys? Yeah, bits and pieces. I mean, I watched it all.
They're serious. They're dead serious.
No, this is not a dog and pony show. This is not them, picking up scraps and thinking, well, hey, we got an easy foot in the door, let's coast. No, Justin Marks is serious about this, and I've read, like, I got very lucky. Simon Patterson shared a long form interview he had 20 minutes with Justin last week, and I read the interview and my eyes lit up. He gets it. Justin absolutely gets it when it comes to not only what he feels like he can bring to the table with Trackhouse, but also the value of MotoGP as a sport and what he can bring to the table to enhance it. Massively impressed with his interview. Again, go out on the race, go out of your way to read it. It's well worth it. It's a fantastic interview. And I was very impressed by what I saw. I mean, there were some easy wins and there were some easy ticks in the win column here. Pulling out a Nicky Hayden tribute livery is always going to go down well. They leaned
tribute to his what was it, his 08 Ducati.
Yeah, his testing livery. Yeah, it was the Star Spangled Banner livery. Full leaning in.
This bike has no idea what a kilometer is.
No, none whatsoever. It's not a fucking clue. It's a beautiful thing. Keeping
the riders.
They're keeping the riders, which I think they should. I think that's absolutely the right decision. Like, I don't see any reason to change either of their riders right now.
When Miguel Oliveira wasn't getting hit by every cartoon anvil in the state, he was pretty good.
And this was of a team with last year's Aprilias that generally were not competitive in the grand scheme of things, and they had a team that was no longer funding them halfway through the year.
No, they were having to reuse parts because the team couldn't afford to because no one was paying their bills. They were basically running on something more akin, less to last year's Aprilia and more like one of the old satellite team bikes where Yamaha would pick parts out of a dumpster for Tech 3 to use.
Yeah, just vibes and whatnot, to say the least. So yeah, like, all things considered, you give both riders a pass for last year automatically and call it even for this year. And it's worth pointing out, like, Justin has confirmed they have paid the extra few million. They're going to have 2024 machinery straight from the rip with this team for next year.
They're effectively going to be more like a Premac, where they are operating out of the factory directly with a direct line to Aprilia. They're going to have equal equipment. And this is good all around. First of all, this team is probably going to pay their bills. I mean, if those of you who listen to our bike shows, if you don't know Trackhouse and NASCAR, they have been a phenomenal success over the last few years. From the bones of many a racing team, including Dale Earnhardt Incorporated. So we can say that this team is doing it for Dale. Categorically. They get it, and they know how to build a team. They know how to get great people performing. And they've gone from being not a team in the last 5 years to being a championship contending team in NASCAR. That's not easy to do when you consider just how competitive that series is. This helps Aprilia. They've got 4 bikes that are going to get equal data.
Yeah,
they're not going to be splitting their resources. These are 4 of the same bike. We don't know how the 2024 RSGP is going to get on, but if setup was a question mark this year, and I think that is the biggest question mark over this team, is do they know how to set up a bike after Friday? Well, now you have 2 more bikes to get data from. 2 quality riders. That is invaluable.
Invaluable. You've got a very, very fast Raul Fernandez and Miguel Oliveira, who we've always said on this show is a quality
god.
He's one quality bike away from being a world-class rider, in my opinion, and this might be the one for him. And like, from a cultural standpoint, this is massive for the sport. Like, it's an
American team.
We've got an American team on the grid for the first time since the Roberts team back in the mid-2000s. which was the dying embers of leftover Suzuki bits. Let's be real here. It wasn't a serious endeavor compared to what this is going to be. You've got an
This is
owner.
big budget, big
Yeah.
finance, big sponsor,
Yeah.
and factory equipment.
Yeah, they've got big name sponsors, big equipment. Justin understands racing very, very well. He's all for this in that sense, and that's going to be big. And from a cultural standpoint, it's a foot in the door for America again, and the sport needs an American influence. There's many bike fans that are waiting for a reason to be invested in MotoGP again, because we know the series is basically dead in the US, and when it comes to actual coverage, they now have an American team they can easily root for with a popular brand and likable drivers. Let's not forget, Trackhouse had Ross Chastain as championship runner-up last year and had the viral moment of NASCAR in the last 10 years. Like, this is...
Just why it immediately got banned.
Yeah, and they've had
this
F1
team
drivers drive for them as well. They get it. They absolutely get it. So it's just nice to be excited about something in MotoGP again for the first time in a while.
And to that effect, I am so glad that our fears from that season review, this is the season review, the final race episode, that this team was going to end up in limbo. Well, Trackhouse put that to bed pretty much right away. And, people getting paid. Always better than leaving 7 figures of unpaid debts in the paddock.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a win-win for everybody involved. And I'm excited to see what this team will do livery-wise. I'm excited to see what this team does performance-wise. And yeah, like I can't wait to see how that goes. Very excited for that. Let's get into KTM, which again, another
what do we make of KTM this year?
This is a weird mixed bag of a year for KTM, because on the one hand, you've got one shining star, and that was Brad Binder, who put together his best MotoGP. The Lord, Brad Binder, who put together his best season in MotoGP. 4th in the championship this year, 293 points, the highest rankings runner that wasn't on a Duke this year. Didn't win a Grand Prix, 2 sprint wins on the year, but didn't ultimately win a Grand Prix, had 5 podiums across the season. Jack Miller on the other end, not so strong, 11th in the standings, 2 sprint podiums. Only once did he get on a Grand Prix podium all year long. And then Tech 3 was a bit of a mess. I mean, Augusto Fernandez was solid. 17th Rookie of the Year, had the 4th place at Le Mans. Generally, I think he was highly regarded for his effort across the field against the MotoGP guys who care. I think a lot of people were like, no, Fernandez is genuinely good. And did a solid job of what was given this year. Paul Espargaro only took part in 12 races because he missed the first 8 after that horrifying Portimao practice crash on Friday.
His season effectively ended day 1.
His career is now probably over because of that one incident.
Yeah. First of all, thank goodness Paul is, relatively speaking, all right, because man's almost died. What do I make of this? Because for much of this year, KTM were the clear number 2 team, other than those splashes of those flashes where an Aprilia were very, very quick. But also the usual KTM bugbears arrived, where there were weekends where they were amazing and fighting for wins, and there were weekends where they were struggling to get bikes in the top 10, and seemingly no explanation as to why.
I don't know if it's a like an Aprilia extreme where it's like the peaks are even higher but the troughs are even lower. It's kind of
peaks weren't quite as high this year overall.
No.
And that should be, I think, concern for KTM, even though they beat Aprilia in the standings. But they
KTM beat them last year too.
KTM has been slogging away at this.
Yeah, and that's the thing. KTM beat Aprilia last year too. This isn't as big a gain for them as they think it might be. I mean, yeah, Binder was excellent. he peaked for KTM in a sense. But as an overall team, they were probably slightly weaker by having Miguel Oliveira out and then Brad Binder come in and Jack Miller come in. And
we need to have a dialogue on Jack Miller. Is he cooked?
He might. I have concerns with both of their riders right now, and this is weird to say, and I'll get to this. Like with Brad Binder, amazingly, he's gone 2.5 years since his last win, which I think is already startling for a rider of his quality. I think he openly admitted he kind of pulled back when he had chances to win because he didn't want to take anybody out, which is weird because in the back end of the year, Binder
he took a bunch of people out. He was messy.
Yeah, mad, overly aggressive and scrappy, and he was pulling off moves that we butcher Marc Marquez for on the internet. Binder was doing that for the whole back half of the season, and no one better than Eyelid. And I thought that was concerning.
It says 33 on the front of the bike, not 93.
Of course, it's the Marco Melandri problem.
Is he going to peace sign over the line? My God. Yeah, I can only echo that.
And then Miller on the other end, it was all of the usual Jack Miller problems. Yes, we all know we all know he's incredibly quick, as fast as anybody on his day. But again, butchering tires, power sliding bikes, falling down the order in the back half of races. Around the time he became a dad, there was genuine argument that he should be the one that was chopped out of the KTM setup for Pedro Acosta. And I was like, okay, I'll entertain a discussion on this because
he was their worst rider for a large amount of this year because Augusto Fernandez was less spectacular, but a hell of a lot higher floor. I mean, you took Jack Miller, who has never seen a tire he hasn't worn out, and you put him on the bike with perennial tire wear problems.
Not a good combination.
And when Jack was good, there's still something there. He is still fast. But he's the same rider he's always been, and he was never going to benefit being dropped out of the Ducati factory team to a KTM that, again, I think still has fundamental problems understanding their bike and understanding why it's good and where it's good. And yeah, back to Binder for a second. Brad Binder has made himself on. He's Mr. Sunday man. He's consistent. He's smart on Sunday. And he rode like a jackass, pun not intended, in the second half of this year.
Yeah, a lot of overly aggressive overtakes, a lot of punts, a lot of costed himself positions via last lap track limits penalties. He did that 3 times this year as well. He took himself off a podium through last lap track limit violations. It's just sloppy riding.
I'm actually thinking about very George Russell-esque if you look at their 2 years. From George Russell's generally the guy I consider all right, in 2022, really solid on race day, very high floor. This year was scrappy. I feel like Binder had a very mirrored season in that way.
Very much so. And
I expect more out of Binder because for a period of time this year, I thought Binder was rider of the year. Doing what he was doing. That was put right to bed in the second half of this season.
Yeah. I'd actually now definitely put Bez above him in my pound for pound rankings for the year as a rider overall in terms of quality this season. Pedro Acosta coming in to the Tech 3 team next year alongside Augusto. Augusto won the fight to have the number 37, which I thought was quite funny. I was like, no, maybe I'll share with him. And then Augusto was like, no, you're fucking not, kid. Which I thought was, again, quite funny. But Acosta and Fernandez will be their team next year. Paul Espargaro gone. My deep sympathies for Paul, first and foremost. I mean, that crash and the way it played out, it was a career ender in all but name. And there was nothing anybody could have done about that. It's just incredibly... I think the right decision was ultimately made here, but it doesn't mean I have to like it.
Right. If you were going to cut one of the 4, it was going to be Paul.
And the thing is, I'd argue Paul Espargaro's best work was on a KTM. We know how good he can be on this motorcycle. He has been excellent on there in years past. He genuinely does know what he's doing, and we never saw the best of him in MotoGP this season with Tech 3 because this season was over before it had even started. And sadly, he's not the only guy we're going to be talking about with that this year. It's a real shame, and he's one. We didn't like his time at Honda, but he's always been a quality rider outside of that time, and it's a shame that he's had to. This may be the end of his career, and he's lost it in such a just a unfortunate fashion.
It's not supposed to end this way.
No, definitely not. And I think a lot of this is also not only Pole, but also KTM for once again getting themselves into a right mangle over their rider contracts and their rider situations, but also the politics of the sport, because KTM...
We'll get into that, yeah.
Yeah, KTM wanted to have 6 bikes on the grid for 2024. They were more than prepared to either using Husqvarna as one of their side brands for a MotoGP team, or some sort of tie-up with Red Bull, which we all know they're very close to at KTM.
Yeah, they do the aero on this bike, actually.
Yeah, like they use Red Bull's wind tunnel. Yeah, there's no one better for that. But the point is, they could have solved all their problems with 2 more bikes on the grid. They would have been able to bring up Acosta, not cut anybody, and make a genuine run for Marc Marquez either this year or next year. It would have solved all of their problems. We all know KTM will write Marquez a blank check tomorrow, and Red Bull will probably help fund some of that deal if it really came down to it, because we all know that KTM's in bed with Red Bull. So
we didn't even mention it with Honda. They actually lost Red Bull as one of their primary sponsors.
They're following them as an individual rider, but Repsol will not have Red Bull on their bikes next year. So, yeah, KTM once again getting caught up in politics, whether it be rider politics or sporting politics. It's messy again.
Yeah, I mean, it's another example where KTM tries to subvert the sport with their will, and the sport tells them to F off, because they more or less signed up their riders in such a way that they were going to have 6 bikes. 6 riders into 4 doesn't go, and then KTM are the ones who were throwing a fit about it.
Exactly, and yeah, it was political warfare. There was rumors at one point that KTM was like, "Hey, we're not going to give up our concessions on our side of the rule on this unless you give us 2 more bikes." And Dorna was like, "Kick rocks." So
I would say, if they want to play that kind of hardball, we just saw Dorna play hardball with a team.
Oh yeah, 100%.
They really want to play that game.
Yeah.
So I just don't know where KTM goes from here, because it feels like they have all the same problems.
Yeah,
it feels like they have all the same problems every single year. We know Brad Binder is quality. The revolving door on the second factory bike doesn't help. We'll see what happens with that, but I don't expect Jack Miller to... Look, we've seen enough of a sample size with Jack. We know who he is as a rider.
I think he'll be better next year for it, but I'm concerned.
I hope so.
I am concerned, because if Pedro Acosta is halfway decent and as a rookie next year, they will have the itch to move him up immediately. Yeah, no question. And Miller will be the one sacrificed. No doubt in my mind about that. So we shall see. It will be the second time in Miller's career that a young prospect has come up and stolen his lunch money, which would be...
Not again.
First Bastianini, now this. I mean, wouldn't that be something?
But like...
In a minute.
Before we unpack the Red Menace, I'll say, KTM, this has been the same story since you came into the sport. They have to figure out how to set the bike up. This was a problem before aero. This is a problem before ride height devices. They'll put the bike on the track, and they will have no idea why it's fast and why it isn't.
Exactly. They need to get this shit figured out. We know their bike is good. On a good day, it can genuinely beat Ducati. Straight up. When they have 2 riders who on their good days can do that.
In Indonesia, or in Buriram, sorry. the shapes that Brad Binder was making to fight for that win.
Binder did everything right except win that race.
We know that they are knocking on the door when they're good, but they need to be good a hell of a lot more often.
And for a factory the size of KTM and the amount of resources and the amount of money they're throwing at this, it's still terrifying to me that Danny Pedrosa could walk in tomorrow and do a job for them. Like,
he was their second best rider this year overall.
Pedrosa's still so good. Like, I had to mention before we moved on as well, because Danny Pedrosa did 2 wildcard weekends and was like,
ham on both of them.
Yeah, like Danny Pedrosa is he was getting standing ovations every time he came back to the garage. They love him in this KTM camp, and I'm glad that the team has finally recognized just how valuable he is, because he's been priceless in getting KTM to where it. And Mika Kallio, he deserves his flowers as well. They've both worked exceptionally hard to get this team where it is. And like, I love that we all joked on our MotoGP Slack chat about this when I was part of the race, and it was just like, guys, it's not that Bautista is bad, it's that the Danny Pedrosa is just that fucking good. Still in his 38th year of life, Pedrosa would walk back into MotoGP tomorrow and be a top 6 rider is immense.
Well, and the fact that, not that this is a World Superbike podcast, but Alvaro Bautista is very, very badly injured.
Yes.
Need to see how that plays out in his own series next year.
I hope he's okay, relatively speaking. But yeah, not an ideal scenario for a big regulation change that cripples him for being light than most people in the first place, and then he's got genuine back and nerve damage as he enters his 40th year of life. Not ideal at all for Bautista, so wish him the best where that's concerned. Going to be an interesting time to keep an eye on World Bikes over 2024. We'll see how that new era goes with Jonathan Rea on a Yamaha, Toprak on a BMW, and Bautista still being him. But for how much longer, we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of Ducati. Beatings. The team that only lost 3 races out of 20 the entire season. We'll go into this team by team. We'll try and make sense of it, because there's 4 of them to get through here. We'll do probably the least interesting one first, and that was the Gresini team for now. Out of the 4.
Until the last day of the season, the least interesting one here.
Oh, absolutely. Alex Marquez 9th in the points, had a pole position, a couple of sprint wins, a couple of podiums. Fabio Di Giannantonio 12th in the points, 151. I think something like 120 of his points this year came from Japan onwards. Oh,
My dude got fired and said, "Hey, watch this."
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, just my mum went full Usher with it. Just, hand waving, watch this, as like, and then I'm gonna get a job.
I'm about to do the funniest thing on the planet, and just starts beating everyone else.
Won a race, beat Bagnaia straight up in Qatar, and very nearly did it again in Valencia as well. Before
until
finding
got
out what tire pressures were, unfortunately, but still. An interesting place. Alex Marquez, I think, genuinely showed some good improvement this year as a rider to crack the top 10. He should have been, I think, a little higher. I think he was very unlucky the first half of the season as well.
Multiple times. Usually by insert Premac rider here, to the chagrin of your brother. Because I'm pretty sure Ryan Harrison has converted his room to an axe grinding facility exclusively for the beheading of Jorge Martin and Johan Zarco.
Oh yeah, it was a messy time to be a fan of his, especially in the first half of the year, because he was wiped out multiple times over. As Vic in that chat points out, Alex Marquez was another rider this year who kept getting cartoon anvils dropped on him by other Ducatis. And that sums it up. But couple of sprint wins, won the sprint at Silverstone, won the sprint in Sepang. There's clearly something brewing here with Alex, or he's finally getting some consistent form together, showing some of that speed that we've always known he's had from the time he was at his Repsol Honda cameo from 2020. We knew he was fast on his day, and he's showing that a bit more frequently now, and that is good.
He's on it, and really, I think that in his own words, the thing that he's needed to learn how to do is to trust the bike, because the Ducati will give you confidence. It will give you the ability to straddle the line, straddle the limit, and not kill you for it.
Yeah, he openly admitted when he broke 2 of his ribs earlier on in the season, it was actually that riding within himself when he was injured made him realize just how much he could take the piss with this Ducati. It made him a better rider, which is really weird. It's like, if anyone knows their cricket, it's like the Ashes in 2005 when Freddie Flintoff was injured, but actually having that restraint made him a better batter. It's really weird, but this is how athletes can work sometimes, where being injured can make you a bit more aware of what's going on around you, and it can make you better.
It's what we saw with the driving in Baku this year in F1, where actually losing that race taught Max a lot more on how to get the most out of this Red Bull, and we know what happened. Weird to say, Ducati they lost 3 races this year, and that is not even remotely the most dominant performance by an entity this year.
Not even
2023 was weird.
2023 was weird.
Looking at the lap time comparison for Alex between this bike and last year's Honda, it's almost like there's times where it's like going from Moto 2 to MotoGP.
Right.
There's times where he's gaining over 1.5 seconds on raw lap time, because no one can ride a Honda like his brother, and certainly he couldn't. Fabio Di Giannantonio.
What a season that was.
What the hell was that? Because, okay, this dude was one of the worst riders in MotoGP by every objective measure. And then he got fired. And then he was the second best rider in MotoGP, objectively. Statistically.
Yeah,
What the hell?
It's incredibly bizarre how this played out, because I think it was right around Indonesia sort of time where Frankie Kochecki, who is, who's their crew chief, who was crew chief there for that bike and will be for Marc Marquez next year. Remember, that will likely become important later.
It's already important.
Clearly unlocked something within Fabio in the back half of this year when they clearly had nothing to lose. So they clearly thought, sod it, let's have a go, changed the setup, and all of a sudden, Fabio was riding like a top 5 rider the back half of this season. Won a race, arguably should have won another one if it wasn't for Frankie himself holding it up and saying, look, I got it wrong, I played it, I wasn't safe enough on tyre pressures in Valencia when he knew he had a joker to play, and crossed the line in the sprint and the Grand Prix. But no matter which way you slice it, Fabio Di Giannantonio was one of the best riders in the field the back half of this season. He was exceptional, and it showed that he can ride at the very highest level. And
Dre,
it saved his career.
The 6 races before Japan, starting with the Netherlands. Retirement, 13th, 17th, 10th, 17th retirement. Japan, 8th, 4th, 3rd, 9th, win 4th.
It's just incredible. Like he was 20th.
On last year's bike as well.
Yeah, he was 20th in the championship last year. I think he was 20th when that change happened last year. He was arguably the worst full-timer in the field, pound for pound, and he
had
turned
24
it around.
points last year.
Yeah, he turned it around so thoroughly, it saved his MotoGP career, because VR46 was like, well, we've got to sign him. He's too good. There was no better option available. To be fair, I think Fermin Aldeguer's manager got very greedy towards the end of his Moto2 season, asking for a €1 million buyout for a Moto2 rider. Come on now. Raul Fernandez was
if
400K.
He asked for less, he might have actually got it, because my dude was hotter than the surface of the sun to finish this Moto2 season.
Right.
Goofy behavior, but hotter than the surface of the sun. I mean, Di Giannantonio defeated Bagnaia in single combat.
You don't do that by chance.
Not often, no.
Like, he was incredible, and I'm glad that VR46 took the punt on him in the end, because he doesn't really fit what they would normally take on as a rider, but he was too good not to employ. And like I said, Fermin Aldeguar's agent was a dum-dum. Raul Fernandez had a €400,000 buyout, and he had the best Moto2 rookie season in history. And
you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
Aldeguar was good to close out the year. He was very good to close out the year, but he was not Raul Fernandez's 2021. Hell no.
Nothing has ever been.
No. Like, that is a guy you spend $500,000 to unlock. Not $1 million for Aldeguar, who really only got hot the last 4 rounds of the year. Like, call it what it is in that sense. Anyway, let's get into the VR46 team a little bit more, shall we? And we got to cut to the chase here. Marco Bezzecchi, 3rd in the standings this year, 329 points, 3 pole positions, 2 wins, 7 podiums, a sprint win as well. For me, like, if it wasn't for Bagnaia, I would say he's my rookie. He's my rider of the year this year. Bez was sensational. Let's not forget, he was 14th in the standings last year. 14th. 3rd this year. Incredible improvements as a rider. Where did this come from?
I think the overarching theme of Ducati that we can say is that this was the first year Ducati got off to the start that they really should have been getting years ago. There was no teething issues. They were just on it and had the team had the sport under their boot from day one. And this was Bez's arrival. Unfortunately, second half of the team badly blunted by a broken collarbone.
Yeah.
He tailed off heavily in the second half. We'll
just
need to
wasn't the same guy after that.
Him. Yeah, and a collarbone is... look, I've had a bone bruise on a collarbone, tried to ride a bike before. It's not fun. Breaking it, ouch. I don't own any motorcycles that have 300 horsepower, but I'm sure someone does out there. Can't imagine it's very fun.
It's a shame.
It's a mix of, yes, this was really great as a first title lunge, because he was competing for this title before that injury. Not bad. But then you get into, how do you judge this? Do you judge this as fighting with the big kids now? And to that effect, it fell a little bit short. It was falling a little bit short even beforehand, where I think he just lacked that last little percentage. Or do you judge it as this is his first time fighting with the big kids, and this was really good? I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I lean towards the more positive end on that. I think no one in their right mind had Bez as a title contender going into this season. He was a solid rookie, but he wasn't blowing people away in 2022. This was him 2 levels above what we had him at as a rookie last year. For a second-year rider in MotoGP, this was sensational. This guy's got future world champion level potential underneath him. I can't ask for anything more than what Bez did this year. Yeah, the injury was unfortunate. Yes, there was a couple of silly crashes in there here and there, and I still think he needs to find a little bit more consistency. But the upside on this kid, he reminds me of Marco Simoncelli, and that is something that I don't use that term loosely. He's a very, very fast rider, and someone that, if he fully realizes his potential, is going to be right up there with Bagnaia and Martin next year. No question. Like, this year showed he's got him level of promise in there. You don't come into this team and on year 2 you're smacking Luca Marini around by over 100 points.
Yeah, he blew Luca Marini into the middle of next week.
Yeah, and Marini had a good year in his own right. This was not a bad season by Luca Marini by any measure. Couple of pole positions, couple of podium finishes. Good sprint rider. Four times got on the sprint podium as well. So over half distance, very, very fast. Again, not peaking like Bez did, obviously, but again, in a vacuum, this would be a good year by Luca Marini. Like, okay, he's taken a step forward. He's in the top 10 now. He's got a couple of genuine highlights to take from this season. There's some promise here. But Bez was just so goddamn good. It just didn't matter.
Beaten by over 125 points.
Right. It's You know what this is? This is when Ken Griffey Jr. hit 56 home runs in a season in the same year that the Maguire-Sammy Sosa home run chase was going on at the same time. It just didn't matter anymore. It was just
Yeah.
like...
It's like, this is brilliant, but this is far more brilliant.
Exactly.
And yeah, Marini, I hesitate, kind of anonymous through the middle part of the year. Great floor, but not a lot of ceiling. Lots of fringe top 5 down to about 7th, but never much lower than that.
Right, and I think that's why Johan Zarco made those sort of backhanded compliments he'd made about Marini, where he was saying things like, he's a thinking man's rider, he's very intelligent, because I think the term he used was lack of talent. And I was like, oof.
Spicy.
Like, bit harsh, but I can see the logic in what he was saying. But I thought that was very harsh, but maybe that'll be a good thing when he joins Honda next year, because they need some patience and some intelligence on that setup. And
well, the problem is that they're now fundamentally under the same roof. Can't imagine that's going to go too well for but well, that's the general theme, is everyone else who's not involved is just like, yeah, good luck on Honda, buddy.
Yeah. And look, I've interviewed Luca Marini. Very nice bloke. Very frosty when he wants to be. If you feed him a dumb question, he'll let you know about it. I'll say that, but he's no nonsense, Luca.
Does it run in the blood in that family?
It must do, because like he's
someone's half brother,
like his half brother. Very no nonsense when he wants to be, and that might be what Honda needs. Someone that's just a complete non-bullshitter, and that could be helpful. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see how that camp runs. Especially with Davide Brivio. That's going to be interesting. Pramac. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Congratulations to them for winning the team's title. That is a remarkable... The first independent team to ever win the MotoGP team's title. And a salute to them, because that is no easy task given how stacked this sport is.
Given it's never happened before.
Yeah.
We've had independent teams since the sport was born.
Both riders in the top 5 of the standings. Johan Zarco, 5th on 225 points. You forget, Johan Zarco had 4 pole positions this year, which is just wild. Again, over a lap, there are a few better in MotoGP than him. He finally got that first win in Phillip Island. Actually, sorry, I got the wrong name. I actually confused my column. It's actually 4 poles for Martini. You'd have thought he had more this year. We'll get to him in a minute. But he got 6 podiums in his first win in Phillip Island. We all talked about that during the time. It was a great occasion. We finally got the Zarco backflip after 6.5 years on the shelf. We got to see that back again, which was cool. Jorge Martin, championship runner-up, 428 points, 4 wins, 9 sprint wins, the undisputed sprint king of the season, 8 podiums on the year. We've talked about Zarco at length a couple of times on this review already. Let's go straight to Martin. I mean, what the hell do you make of this season? It's like the most frustrating breakout year you could possibly imagine.
When he was good, he was the best rider in the sport, and by a not small margin. In terms of raw talent, he is as good as any of them. And unlike other members of what I would say the top 5 is right now, he, alongside Bagnaia, has the bike to prove it. The bike to show it. And yet, when he was bad, it was almost unwatchable, because he would just do silly shit. Throwing wins away from comfortable leads, riding through people. I mean, he went bowling in Austria. Crypto Data didn't pay for that bowling episode, but damn, did we get one. And generally just as a first run at a title, it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
A commendable effort.
A commendable effort against a guy in Bagnaia who was terrific in the clutch. However, this was a very winnable title for Martin, and it seems like he got caught up in just about everything but the riding down the stretch, and he folded like cheap cardboard.
I think I've got very little to add here. That I can only echo the sentiments that you've already said. Mart, like
he's way too emotional and obsessed with getting in Bagnaia's head rather than just riding the damn motorcycle down the stretch.
I get why he did that in Valencia. I understand why he did. And
I think beyond just Valencia, I think for 3 or 4 races,
I think
he was like he was playing games rather than just getting on with the job.
A little bit. I don't want to be too harsh on Martin, because this is a huge step forward for Martin. This was like we've done
he did
this
not
show.
Have a good 22. We'll say that.
No, and like this is a guy that we were worried about his job a couple of years ago. Like with Bagnaia. Bagnaia was that guy when he first started in MotoGP a little while ago. That we were there was genuine arguments to replace him with Johan Zarco. That was a very real conversation that was had at the time. I don't want to be too harsh on Martin, because this was his first year as a true contender, and that is something we have to take into account here. This is, again, like Bez, a guy that has taken a huge leap forward. We saw the potential with Martin a couple of years ago as to what he could do. This was the year he fully realized that, and the format change. No rider in the field utilized the format change of the sprint race better than he did. 9 sprint wins is a remarkable accomplishment. That is insane speed. And like you said, on a good day, if he was dialed in, completely untouchable. Not even Bagnaia was like that this year at times. Only a couple of times.
There was 2 or 3 races where, I mean, he blew Bagnaia out of the water, and this is with Bagnaia blowing the rest of the field out of the water behind him.
Right. And that just doesn't happen. Martin won 4 times, and the 4 times were impressive. But you cannot talk about Martin's season in a fair manner without mentioning Indonesia and Australia, that 2-race sequence where he was 3 seconds clear of Maverick Vinales in Indonesia and crashed from the lead when he lost concentration and binned it. And then 1 round later in Australia, in my opinion, a needless gamble.
One of the qualifying laps of the year, certainly the 2-wheeled qualifying lap of the year. He beat that field by half a second. And then he throws on the soft tires.
Michelin told them not to do it. Like, Michelin was like, we strongly recommend you don't use the soft. And then Martin gambled on the soft. He had enough pace where he didn't need to gamble on that tire. He did, and he got punished badly.
That's what I talk about when I say he was a lap away from it looking like a stroke of genius, and instead, I mean, across those 2 races, he left 35 plus points on the table.
In a championship, he lost by 39.
In a championship, he lost by 39, which also involved riding like a complete jackass in the season finale and impaling Marc Marquez.
No better word for it.
He will learn from this.
I think he will.
He better learn from this. But I don't think you're going to win any MotoGP titles at this point being head empty only speed.
No. You need more than that to beat Bagnaia. Because Bagnaia has that speed.
And Bagnaia is that same guy. But he has far more risk mitigation than Martin does. And that is a scary sentence given the context of Bagnaia's 2 championships in the top flight.
But you could
both of them left a lot of points on the table.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Bagnaia in a minute. And I think there's a key stat that I think sums that battle up that I don't think has been addressed, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, like this is still a great season by Jorge Martin, and one that shows he's not just this pretender with raw speed. He can put together a title campaign, and he deserved to be in the conversation for the championship this year, and he earned it. But he also threw it away, and that is something that I hope he will learn from on and off the track, because we didn't talk about this a lot, and this news has come up, and I want to address this on the show as well. On a Spanish TV interview a couple of weeks ago, Jorge Martin used a slur in Spanish language that translates to F word, the other F word. I'm glad that Martin came out and apologized for this last week, and it wasn't just a sorry if you're offended. It was a sorry.
No, this was a genuine, like,
it was a sincere
I'm sorry,
apology.
I fucked up.
I'm sorry, I messed up. We need to evolve our use of... the key word is we need to evolve our use of language. He acknowledged that this wasn't just a sorry if you're offended. This was a genuine, we need to look in the mirror and reflect about what wordage we are using here. It was a sincere and a good apology, which is rare in this space, and I want to acknowledge that. I don't think he's a bad person.
Very concerning, the droves of people that then attempted to defend him for it while he himself sincerely apologized for the remark.
Including the Aleix Espargaro. I expected better from him. From the elder statesman of the paddock. There's a lot of people that need to look in the mirror and do better.
Tell your kids about that, Aleix.
Yeah, and I'm glad he's apologized. This just does not make what he did acceptable in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But I believe that if you want to do our due diligence as journalists and as broadcasters, we should acknowledge the fact that he did come out with a sincere apology. And I hope it's reflective of his entire season, because I hope he reflects, looks back and say, you know what, that was a good year, but you know what that could have been. And it could have been so much more from Martin. And he's very nearly there. That's what makes it so frustrating. He threw away the back half of a lot of this season and still only lost the title by 39. It was doable. It was a winnable championship, no question. And I hope he learns from that in the future. The factory team, Enea Bastianini, my goodness, only finished 11 races out of 20 this year. 15th in the championship, and his entire season got derailed from two key flashpoints. One, being taken out by Luca Marini in the first sprint race ever in MotoGP history in Portimao, and he missed 5 rounds through that, and then he missed 4 more when he tucked the front at turn 1 at Catalunya and took out literally almost every Ducati in the field.
Bastianini was the other season alongside Pol Espargaro that basically ended before it began. And with all that promise coming in from 22, he was monstrously quick in 2022 on the year-old Ducati that, unlike the 22 when it first arrived, there was no teething pains. The 21 just worked from day one. This 23 worked from day one, and yet he did not get to reap the benefits of it. When he wasn't riding hurt, he wasn't riding at all. And just a wasted season from a very, very talented young man.
Such a shame. He's so good. And like I said, let's not forget, Martin this year was Bastianini last year.
Exactly.
Maybe not. Yeah, like it was, and arguably it was even more impressive given that Bastianini was on the previous year's bike. Yes, there was some Ducati early teething problems, but we all know how good Bagnaia was. And Bastianini last year gave as good as he got as Bagnaia did in the back half of that 2022 season as well. That was a guy that took a huge leap forwards last season. And his entire year got derailed right from the start, and he just could not recover it. And it's a real shame because he's another guy that could be in contention next year if the setup all goes to plan. We all know the ability is there with Bastianini. He's proven that in the last year that he's good enough to contend. And
I mean, the big worry this year was that his job was under the gun, because there was talk that if Martin won the title, he would get jettisoned from the factory team and swapped over to Premac, because Premac is they're really a half factory, half independent, with the support and, the support behind the scenes they get from Ducati. But he had one win this year where he just blew the field out of the water in Malaysia. His best finish otherwise was 8th on 3 occasions.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah. one 5-race stretch where he was out, one 4-race stretch where he was out. 3 of those overall being DNSs as he tried to come back and he was in too much pain because the injuries he got were injuries you can't ride through. You can't ride through a broken shoulder blade. You just can't do it, especially not on one of these things.
Champion.
Man, the champion. And I don't know what to think.
I know what to think. There's one stat that when I was looking through all of this that leapt off the page to me is why Bagnaia won this title and why Martin didn't. Jorge Martin had 8 podium finishes this year. Francesco Bagnaia had 15.
Yeah, I'll do it.
That's the stat. That's the one. I was
and
like...
yet, that doesn't explain that points gap.
The sprints, like...
The sprints... It's like their 2 seasons are like mirrored with one another.
Right.
And even time frame wise, in the first half, the only thing keeping Bagnaia ahead was the sprints.
Mm-hmm.
In the second half, the only thing keeping Martin in contention was the sprints.
It's so weird how the parallel swapped as the season went on. Because I think Martin won 7 out of the last 8 sprints to close out the year. And Bagnaia won 4 of the first 7 or 8 sprints to start the year because he had a rough start to this season because he tucked the front at Cota and Austin and we thought, oh no, same old Bagnaia again. He tucked the front at Argentina in the wet and we thought, oh, just take the points, Bagnaia. We're doing this again. And to his credit, there was only one DNF, for the back half of the year, and that was in India, and that was of his own making. But Bagnaia, when it mattered, he started using those sprints to develop Grand Prix stint strategy and knowing how far he could push. It was an intelligent thinking man season from Bagnaia that won him this championship. And that what he did in the back half of this season was the Bagnaia that we'd always wanted him to be. The guy that found his level, found his mark, found his consistency, and didn't necessarily think he had to win every race to win the championship. He became the point scorer, and that's what got him over the line this time, without question.
At times. Because he did also try to throw the bike up the road in Qatar, counter-lunging when he had no reason to.
Hail Mary. Thankfully, he missed and wasn't punished for it. Not
Jesus.
Really.
And
I get your point.
It's just both of these 2 championship protagonists just left so many points on the table this year. Whether it be in sprints, whether it be tucking the front from wins. You look at Bagnaia's, down the stretch, and you look at Martin's in purely race and you think there is no way that Martin only finished 39 points behind, but then there's the sprints.
Just that was a difference maker. And that's what was keeping Martin in it down the stretch. It was the death by 1,000 cuts. I'm going to take 3 points out of here. I'm going to take 5 points out of here in these sprints. And I'm going to have to make you try and bully you into going hard in the Grand Prix to make up the difference. And it was just the way that Martin closed out the year. And to be fair, we didn't even include the dud tire he got in Qatar, which completely ruined any
which we
chance
don't know
of the
if
title.
it was or not. Because Michelin tore the thing down, says nothing wrong with it.
Who do you want to believe on that one? Because Michelin has precedent.
I checked my work and I have found nothing wrong with it.
That depends on who do you want to believe on that one? Because like I said, Michelin has precedent for getting this wrong.
Yes, they do.
So,
another weird thing down the stretch as well is that Bagnaia was the constant. He was the constant on the podium. He never wavered from the podium down the stretch while everyone else did. Sometimes it was Binder, sometimes it was Martin, sometimes it was Zarco with his win in Phillip Island, sometimes it was DG Antonio.
6 straight podiums to close out the year. Nobody else came close.
Yeah, and in that
no
sense, he became even with the flaws in leaving the points on the table, he was the most floor out of all the floor guys, which is weird to say when he only won this championship with 467 points, which when you delete the sprints from it, is the year is actually kind of messy.
Yeah.
And that's ignoring the fact that we still don't know what happened, but he attempted to travel to Saturn in Catalonia.
And we will never know just how or why that came about, because Ducati said, we don't know. We looked at the data, nothing looked out of place. Was it a rider error? Was it something with the bike we don't know about? We will probably never know unless Bagnaia or someone deep within Ducati reveals it for themselves or figures something out that we don't know about. But
he dodged the biggest bullet of the year because he was hit mid-track by a bike, and he hit it at just the right angle that it left him with contusions and nothing more.
He could have died that day. And we're having a very different conversation about this sport. And again, we could have it could have been world champion killed in Catalonia incident. I cannot stress that enough. We were very close to that being an actual thing. And yeah, we got away with one there. And the sport as a whole got away with one there. But the way Bagnaia mitigated that incident, came round to Misano 7 days later, could barely walk, but still got a podium in the sprint and the Grand Prix that weekend. Guts, fortitude, all of those words we used to describe what these riders can do, was remarkable. And yeah, like I said, 7 out of 8 on the podium to close out the year. Like I said, nobody else in the field had more than 3 to close out the season. He found consistency at the best possible time. And
he did exactly what he did exactly what he needed to do, watching Martin self-destruct across the way. Because he didn't need to go for wins, because Martin was just either spitting the bike up the road or spitting it into the side of a Honda.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's the funny thing is, I still think Bagnaia is capable of even greater heights than what he's achieved this season.
I don't think, if you judge this in the context of a Stoner or a Lorenzo or a Marquez year, he did not have a particularly amazing year as far as points percentage. No. He can do better.
And that's the scary thing. He absolutely can do better. Before we get out of here, we've talked a lot about some of these issues in the sport before, but just to put a neat little bow on 2023 as a MotoGP season, it was already gone 105 minutes here as well. Do not get it twisted. We were spoilt. We had a genuine title decider down the stretch. 2 very different, very interesting protagonists at the front of the queue. This was not a great season. Not in my opinion. Like, we were lucky that the title fight bailed the season out to a degree, and that, if anything, that Bagnaia injury brought Martin back into play brilliantly, and that's what kind of made it interesting down the stretch. The overall race quality is not great.
It cratered this year.
It's not great. There was 3 or 4 good races. Yeah. There was 3 or 4 great races. Like Germany was great. Phillip Island always delivers. It did again. Buriram was fantastic. Probably the race of the year for MotoGP. But that was the exception.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't even think Phillip Island was especially great until Martin's tires melted. I thought it was
that's what made it interesting.
Down.
Yeah,
that's what made it interesting. But on the quality of the bikes and the racetrack, even Phillip Island had Martin not lost his mind with tire selection, might have been a dud this year. And I can't live in a world where Phillip Island produces dud races.
No, that's never going to fill you with confidence. No, and the tire pressure situation is not great. It was a farce by the end of the year with the penalties, and now that's going to be treated as a disqualification next year in a sport that does not know how to handle the tire pressure scenario right now.
Write this down as a Charles Barkley guarantee. Guarantee that we're going to see race wins struck off the board en masse next year.
I think we're going to get a lot of disqualifications next season, because fundamentally, mechanics do not know how their races are going to play out from the garage. and that is going to be a problem. In a sport
We've
where you're
got-
designed to
we've got the
take
fastest
liberties,
motorcycles. We've got the fastest motorcycles ever, Dre. Fitted with tires that are not fit for purpose. Let's call it what it is.
not ideal, and Michelin are still a year away from a potential solution to this problem, and that's a potential solution, not a guaranteed one. To be fair to Michelin, and this is not on them, they were blindsided by the amount of forces that these bikes now generate through their front tires because of the dirty air that comes from the aero and downforce these bikes now generate. And they've had to adapt themselves to figuring out something that the sport did not consider when they opened Pandora's box on aerodynamics like 8-9 years ago. And that's going to be a huge problem for this sport. Yeah, it's a collateral damage that they've not been able to figure out yet, and they likely will not do for another year. There's reasons to be optimistic. I think next year is going to be fascinating with the paddock with Marquez on a Duke and whatnot. I think the concession system they've brought in is a genuine net positive. I like what they've done with the adapted rules. I hope it makes a difference and that Japan can figure their shit out, and that Aprilia and KTM can use the subtle advantages to make gains on Ducati. I think that was the point of it, to bring everybody else up and not chop Ducati's knees away, which I think would have been fundamentally unfair. They deserve their success. They have poured tens of millions into their biking and race development, and they've been richly rewarded for it on two wheels across World Superbikes and MotoGP. They have now become the premier racing manufacturer in global two-wheel motorsport now. They're even trying to get into motocross now, which is going to be fascinating to see how that goes. But they are winning everything, and they have made a concerted effort to win in every department, and it's worked. And they deserve all the praise in the world for that, because they've been phenomenal for half a decade now. And it's working out beautifully for them. It's not going to make for a captivating title fight, though, if this keeps up. And it would be nice to see more of a competition in the field. That's how I look at it, anyway.
Can't really add a whole lot to that. I mean, I am very concerned about the state of the tires going into next year, because the bikes aren't going to get slower.
Nope. They're only going to get quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yep. And it feels like, more than anything else, the Ducati is the one that is really straddling the line when it comes to the tire pressure games. And I really don't want to see a title decided by a tire pressure disqualification, because the sport won't give Michelin the tools needed to develop a tire, because they won't let them test. Marc Marquez on a Ducati.
Fun.
God help us all.
That is going to be a fought for the ages. Thank you for listening to all our MotoGP coverage throughout 2023. It's not been the funnest of rides, but we've tried to make it interesting, certainly. And we'll be back with more of that after the Sepang test for our season preview at the end of February. Until then, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week with the 7th Motorsport 101 Award Show, celebrating the best, worst, and everything in between on the Motorsport 101 network across the year of 2023. Thanks, Jason, for correcting me. It's actually the 8th, but one of them was never aired, etc., etc. We get it. Back in the shell. Until next week, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you guys then. Sayonara.
Oh, what color diecast do you want?